One body, four minds, four completely different talents that should have been impossible for a single person to master. When Sarah Martinez walked onto the America's Got Talent stage, she thought she was auditioning alone, a singer hoping to share her music with the world, but Emma the dancer, Alex the comedian, and Riley the poet had been waiting 15 years for their chance to perform, and they weren't about to let Sarah have all the spotlight. Simon Cowell thought he was about to judge another aspiring vocalist. He had no idea he was about to witness the most psychologically complex performance in television history. What happened in the next 6 minutes would challenge everything anyone thought they knew about identity, about talent, about what the human mind is capable of when trauma fractures it in unexpected ways. When Sarah began to switch between personalities mid-performance, when each alter took control to showcase their unique abilities, Simon Cowell realized he wasn't watching one person overcome their challenges. He was watching four separate artists who happened to share the same body prove that sometimes our greatest struggles become our most extraordinary strengths. Let me take you back to the moments before Sarah Martinez and Emma, Alex, and Riley showed the world that multiple personalities don't have to mean multiple problems. Sometimes they mean multiple gifts. It was Friday evening at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, and America's Got Talent was in the middle of what would become its most psychologically fascinating season yet. The familiar energy buzzed through the venue, 3,400 audience members filling the red velvet seats, many of them from psychology and mental health communities who had heard rumors about tonight's unprecedented audition through professional networks and online support groups. Simon Cowell sat at the judges' table in his signature black t-shirt and perfectly tailored blazer, but tonight his expression carried more curiosity than usual. The producers had briefed him about this particular contestant in terms that seemed like science fiction. They'd explained that he might be witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, identity, and human capability. Sofia Vergara was unusually quiet, having been both fascinated and concerned during the pre-show briefing about Sarah's condition and the ethical implications of featuring someone with dissociative identity disorder on national television. Heidi Klum and Howie Mandel were both intrigued, understanding that they were about to witness something that had never been attempted on a talent show before. Terry Crews had spent extra time preparing for this introduction, knowing that his words needed to be respectful of both the complexity of the condition and the humanity of everyone involved. The evening had already been surprising, but everyone involved in the production understood that what was about to happen would be unprecedented. This wasn't about discovering talent in the traditional sense. This was about exploring the outer boundaries of human consciousness and creativity. Backstage, Sarah Martinez sat in the contestant waiting area, but sitting was a complicated description for what was happening. At 29, she appeared to be having an intense internal conversation, her facial expressions shifting subtly, her hands moving in different patterns, her posture changing as if different people were taking turns inhabiting her body. Beside her sat Dr. James Morrison, the psychiatrist who had been treating Sarah's dissociative identity disorder for the past 8 years and who had reluctantly agreed to supervise this unprecedented public appearance. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" Dr. Morrison asked quietly, though he knew that Sarah might not be the one who answered. The stress of live television, the pressure of performance, it could trigger unpredictable switching. The woman looked at him, but when she spoke, her voice carried a different tone, more confident and authoritative than Sarah's typical, gentle manner. "Dr. Morrison, this is Emma. We've discussed this extensively in our internal meetings. Sarah wants to sing, I want to dance, Alex wants to do comedy, and Riley wants to share poetry. For 15 years, we've taken turns expressing ourselves in therapy sessions and private moments. Tonight, we want to show the world that having multiple personalities doesn't mean being broken. It means being complex." The journey to this moment had been long and initially traumatic. Sarah had developed dissociative identity disorder following severe childhood abuse, her mind's way of protecting her by creating separate identities to handle different aspects of trauma and daily life. What started as a survival mechanism had evolved into something more sophisticated: four distinct personalities, each with their own interests, abilities, and creative talents. Sarah was the original host personality, gentle, introspective, with a beautiful singing voice that she used to self-soothe during difficult times. Emma had emerged as the protector, strong, athletic, expressing herself through dance and physical movement. Alex had developed as the social facilitator, funny, outgoing, using humor to deflect tension and connect with others. Riley was the intellectual, deep, philosophical, processing complex emotions through poetry and written word. The remarkable thing about this case, Dr. Morrison had explained to colleagues, is that each personality has developed distinct talents that complement rather than compete with each other. It's as if Sarah's mind created a complete creative team to help her navigate the world. The decision to audition for AGT had been controversial, both within Sarah's internal system and in the therapeutic community. Some experts worried about exploitation, about turning a serious mental health condition into entertainment. But Dr. Morrison had eventually supported the idea after months of discussion with all four personalities. They're not performing their disorder, he had explained to the show's producers. They're performing despite it, or perhaps because of it. These are legitimate talents that happen to exist within one person who experiences consciousness differently than most people. Sarah Martinez, called Maria, one of the production assistants, her voice carrying the careful respect that everyone had been coached to use. The woman in the chair looked up, and her expression shifted slightly, more uncertain, more gentle. This was clearly Sarah, the original personality, resuming control. "I'm ready," she said softly, standing up with the careful movements of someone who was never entirely sure which part of their consciousness would be driving their body at any given moment. She wore a simple black dress that could work for singing, dancing, comedy, or poetry, the compromise outfit that all four personalities had agreed upon during their internal negotiations. Remember," Dr. Morrison said, walking with her toward the stage entrance, "if the switching becomes too rapid or disorienting, if you feel like you're losing co-consciousness, signal to me and we'll stop immediately." Sarah nodded, but then her expression shifted slightly, more confident, more playful. "Don't worry, Doc," she said, but the voice was different, more animated. "This is Alex. We've got this handled. We've been practicing our transitions, and we're all excited to finally show what we can do." Terry Crew's voice carried across the theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sarah Martinez." The curtain rose, and Sarah began the walk that would either be the most innovative performance in AGT history or a deeply concerning public display of mental illness. The audience's reaction was initially normal. They saw a woman in her late 20s walking onto the stage with typical pre-performance nerves. But those familiar with dissociative disorders might have noticed the subtle signs. The slight pauses in her gait, the way her facial expressions seemed to shift subtly, the sense that she was not entirely alone in her body. Simon leaned forward, studying Sarah with intense curiosity. There was something about this contestant that seemed different from the very beginning, though he couldn't quite identify what it was. "Good evening," Terry said warmly as Sarah reached center stage. "Good evening," Sarah replied, her voice soft and musical. "Thank you for having me, us, here tonight." The slight correction was the first public indication that this audition would be unlike any other. "What's your name?" Sarah paused for a moment, and her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "That's complicated," she said, and now her voice carried a slightly different tone. "I'm Sarah Martinez, but I share my life with Emma, Alex, and Riley. We have what's called dissociative identity disorder, which means we're four distinct personalities sharing one body." A murmur of intrigue and concern rippled through the audience. This was already uncharted territory for AGT. Can you explain what that means? Terry asked gently. Sarah's posture shifted, more confident, more animated. Hi there, this is Alex now, she said, and her entire demeanor had changed, more outgoing, more comedic timing in her speech patterns. Think of us like roommates who share the most cramped apartment imaginable, each other's brain. Sarah likes to sing, Emma's our athlete and dancer, Riley's our poet and philosopher, and I'm the one who makes everyone laugh when things get too serious. Simon's eyes widened. He was witnessing what appeared to be a genuine personality switch happening in real time on live television. And you're all here to audition tonight? Terry continued, clearly fascinated. The expression shifted again, more graceful, more poised. I'm Emma now, she said, and even her posture was different, straighter, more athletic. We've been taking turns our whole life, but we've never had the chance to perform together publicly. Tonight, we want to show that having multiple personalities doesn't mean being broken. It means being a complete creative team. That's incredible, Terry said. What are you going to perform for us? Another shift, this time to a more gentle, contemplative expression. This is Riley, she said, her voice now carrying an almost poetic cadence. We've created what we call a consciousness medley. Each of us will take control to showcase our individual talents, demonstrating that one mind can house multiple artists. Simon found himself completely absorbed by what he was witnessing. This wasn't acting or performance art. These seemed to be genuine, distinct personalities, each with their own mannerisms, speech patterns, and presence. All right, Terry said, stepping back. This is definitely a first for AGT. The stage is yours. Sarah, or rather the collective of Sarah, Emma, Alex, and Riley, positioned herself center stage. For a moment, she stood completely still, and observers could almost sense an internal conversation happening. Then Sarah, the original personality, began to speak. This is for everyone who's ever felt like they were multiple people trying to figure out how to be one person in the world. Music began, a gentle melody that seemed to invite Sarah's soft, beautiful singing voice. I used to think I was broken, shattered into pieces that would never heal, 4 voices in one body trying to figure out what's real. Sarah's voice was pure and emotional, carrying the weight of someone who had struggled to understand their own identity. But as the song continued, something remarkable began to happen. Her posture shifted, became more fluid, more athletic, and suddenly she was moving, not just singing, but dancing with a completely different style and skill level. But then we learned to work together, she sang, but now the voice was stronger, more confident. This was Emma, taking control while maintaining the melody, but adding sophisticated contemporary dance movements that seemed impossible to execute while singing. The audience was transfixed. They were witnessing what appeared to be one person seamlessly becoming another person with entirely different physical abilities. As the dance sequence reached its peak, the movement style shifted again, more playful, more comedic, and suddenly the personality that was in control was making the audience laugh with physical comedy and humorous facial expressions while still maintaining the musical performance. And Alex keeps us laughing, she sang with perfect comedic timing, when the world gets too intense. The humor was genuine, skilled, professional-level comedy being performed by someone who moments earlier had been singing and dancing. But the final transformation was the most dramatic. The movement became more contemplative, more deliberate, and when she spoke next, it was in a rhythmic, poetic cadence that was completely different from the singing voice. 4 minds, 1 body, countless dreams. We are not broken. We are multifaceted streams of consciousness flowing through shared experience, teaching the world that difference is not deficiency. Riley had taken control, delivering original poetry with the skill and depth of a trained spoken word artist. The performance concluded with all 4 personalities seeming to blend together, their distinct voices and movements creating a finale that was part song, part dance, part comedy, part poetry, a true multimedia experience performed by one body housing four artists. The silence that followed was profound. No one in the theater, not the audience, not the judges, not the crew, had ever seen anything like what they had just witnessed. Then the applause began, but it was complicated applause. Appreciation mixed with confusion, amazement mixed with concern, entertainment mixed with deep questions about consciousness, identity, and the nature of human performance. Simon stood up slowly, his expression showing genuine bewilderment. I I don't know what to say, he began, his voice carrying uncertainty that was rare for him. I don't know if I just watched one person with extraordinary range, or four people sharing one body, or something else entirely that I don't have words for. The woman on stage looked at him, and her expression seemed to shift through multiple subtle changes before settling. "This is Sarah again," she said gently. "I understand your confusion. We've been living with this confusion for 15 years. But what we've learned is that the question isn't whether we're one person or four people. The question is whether our art moves you, whether our story helps you understand that the human mind is more complex and capable than we usually imagine." Simon walked closer to the stage, his fascination overriding his uncertainty. Each personality demonstrated completely different skills, professional-level skills. How is that possible? Another subtle shift, and now the voice was more animated. "This is Alex. Think of it like this. When you learn to play piano, your brain develops neural pathways for that skill. When trauma causes the mind to split, sometimes those pathways develop differently in each personality. Sarah practiced singing. I developed comedy through social situations. Emma used dance for physical expression, and Riley processed emotions through poetry. We're like four people who happen to grow up in the same brain." Sophia was leaning forward, completely absorbed. "Are you in communication with each other?" "This is Emma now," came the response with different posture and presence. "We share memories and can sometimes co-consciousness, be aware at the same time. It's like being part of a creative collective where everyone has different specialties, but we all care about the same projects." Heidi asked, "Is this condition something you're trying to heal from, or something you've learned to live with?" The expression shifted to something more contemplative. "Riley here. That's the question we've wrestled with for years. Traditional therapy focuses on integration, trying to blend us back into one personality, but we've discovered that our multiplicity might not be a problem to solve. It might be a different way of being human. We're not broken, we're just organized differently." Howie, typically the comedian himself, was unusually serious. "Do you ever conflict with each other?" A quick shift to the more playful personality. Alex again. "Oh, all the time. Sarah wants to practice singing when Emma wants to exercise. Riley wants to write poetry when I want to watch comedy shows. But that's like any family or roommate situation. You learn to negotiate, compromise, and respect each other's needs." Simon was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing something unprecedented in his decades of judging talent. "What you've shown us tonight challenges every assumption I have about performance, about identity, about what's possible for human consciousness," he said finally. "I'm not sure if this is the most extraordinary talent I've ever seen, or if I'm witnessing something that transcends the concept of talent entirely." He looked at his fellow judges, then back at Sarah, Emma, Alex, Riley. "But what I can say is that you've created something unprecedented. You've taken what many people would consider a disability and transformed it into an art form. You've shown us that the human mind is capable of things we don't understand, and that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most unique gifts." Simon walked to his golden buzzer, but then paused. "Actually, this is such an extraordinary situation that I think it deserves recognition from everyone." All four judges approached their golden buzzers. Sarah, Emma, Alex, and Riley. Simon announced, "You have just given us the most psychologically complex and artistically innovative performance in AGT history. You deserve a unanimous golden buzzer." All four judges pressed their buzzers simultaneously. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, but the woman on stage seemed to experience it through multiple perspectives simultaneously: joy, gratitude, artistic satisfaction, and philosophical reflection, all crossing her face in subtle shifts. "Thank you," she said, and it was unclear which personality was speaking, or if somehow all of them were speaking together. "Thank you for seeing us not as a medical curiosity, but as artists who happen to experience consciousness differently." 3 months later, Sarah, Emma, Alex Riley won America's Got Talent with a performance that seamlessly blended all four of their talents into a cohesive artistic statement about identity, consciousness, and human potential. But more importantly, their story sparked a global conversation about neurodiversity, about different ways of experiencing consciousness, and about the possibility that some conditions labeled as disorders might actually be different forms of human organization. Mental health professionals began studying their case as an example of how multiplicity could be lived with rather than cured, how different personalities could collaborate rather than compete. Dr. Morrison published a groundbreaking paper on cooperative multiplicity, demonstrating how some people with DID could thrive by learning to work with their different personalities rather than trying to eliminate them. The lessons Sarah, Emma, Alex, and Riley taught the world is profound. Human consciousness is far more complex and capable than we typically imagine. What we label as disorders might sometimes be different ways of organizing human experience, and sometimes the most extraordinary art comes from the most extraordinary minds. Simon Cowell learned that judging talent sometimes means recognizing that talent itself might be more complex than one person, one skill, one performance. Sometimes it's about witnessing the full spectrum of human potential expressing itself in ways that challenge every assumption about what's possible. And the four personalities sharing one body proved that identity doesn't have to be singular to be authentic, that collaboration can happen within consciousness itself, and that sometimes the most beautiful performances come from learning to harmonize not just with others, but with all the different parts of yourself.